Hello wonderful people and welcome back. Today I'm going to be looking at The Wheel of Time, episode 8, season 1, The Eye of the World. And this, wow, what an episode it was. Before I get stuck into that though, because I could easily just start talking about it, if you are new here, go back and watch my other episodes or my other videos about the episodes. And I basically watch the episode and then I sit down and write notes about it. I've watched it twice before I wrote the notes this time because it took me a while to form my opinion about what was going on. And I'm glad I did because I definitely enjoyed the second viewing of it a lot more. But for those that are tuning in for the first time, I've read the first 3 books in the series and I'm currently working my way through book 4 and I'm enjoying that too. So what I'm doing is actually talking about the episodes in relation to my experience of Wheel of Time so far. So if you haven't read book 1 through to 3, there may be spoilers for that, which means that there might be spoilers for season 2. So I just would suggest maybe avoiding watching unless you have read the books, and that's fine. So I'm going to get stuck into talking about the episode The Eye of the World, and I will say stick around. This is probably my most negative, I suppose. I've picked it apart a lot more, or I found things that I don't like a lot more in this episode than I have of any of the other episodes, but I still stand by the fact that I thought it was a good episode. It didn't have the same wow factor. And as I said, on a second viewing, I enjoyed it a lot more. And I'll maybe talk about that a little bit more at the end. So I'm a little bit unsure how I feel about this episode. That's how I started writing. So I watched it initially when it first came out and have taken almost a full week to process my thoughts on it, and I decided in the end to watch it again because I just couldn't settle on how I was feeling about it. There are some really great moments followed by quite a few things I'm not so sure about, and I'm still not sure about them, but I'm feeling better about them than I was when I wrote this first bit. Moments that got me really excited, there were some really fantastic moments, and then some I just sat there confused about the decisions that were made. I'm going to try this in a somewhat logical or linear manner, and then I went back at the end and wrote, no, this did not happen. I went off on some tangents and talked about storylines. It makes more sense, I feel, to talk about a storyline that sometimes than it in order of how it happened. So I've done a little bit of both, forgive me. So to start with, introducing Luz Thurin Telemon, and I thought this was a fantastic scene. I thought this was a great way to start the episode. It sets up so much that even I don't fully understand yet. I'm hoping that we get to see more of this kind of stuff in the books down the track, or we learn more about it even if we don't see it. But I also find that it really shows how much was really lost in the breaking 3,000 years ago, and if they were so advanced and the breaking sent them back so far, imagine how bad it would be for the world at the moment if a second breaking would happen. And I think that scene helped raise the stakes for the viewer in a way that maybe it hadn't done previously. Before that, it was just like, oh, you know, things have changed. But this actually showed how much had changed and how there was that regression in a way. So I thought it was really quite well done and a really great inclusion. There's also the suggestion, and this is me speculating more than anything else because I haven't read enough to know this, but there's that suggestion that maybe if the female Aes Sedai had stood with Luz, the effect would have been different, but the Tamerlan seat, not the Amerlin seat, but the Tamerlan seat, I believe that was the natural progression that happened. Things were lost in the breaking and that was one of them. But she feared corruption of the whole One Power, so didn't want to go near this situation. So I thought that was really really great because she's suggesting that Luz shouldn't be doing this at all, and he is suggesting that if she had stood with him, then things might have gone differently. So I just think it's a really great two sides kind of thing, different opinions, different approaches, and who's to say who's right? It's hard to say what would have happened if they hadn't stood against the Dark One at that moment. I don't know. I'm hoping we get to see more of this. Also, Luz with the baby is heartbreaking, especially knowing what he's likely to do to it in future episodes, maybe, after the corruption hits him. But it also connects him further. I thought this was a really nice connection of Rand with baby Joya in the future scenes, which that scene, the scene that he experiences, that moment, that was part of a Gwen's acceptance test. So I'm not sure I like it being used there, but I also think it could be used quite cleverly for a Gwen later as well. So that was one of those moments I'm not 100% sure about, but I actually really liked the inclusion of it for that link between Luz and the baby. He's going off to save this world, and Rand could choose this world with this baby, little baby Joya. So I thought it was an interesting little contrast there. The design for the futuristic past old world was awesome. I really liked that. I haven't seen enough of the past in the books to have formed a full picture in my head, but loved that it was both futuristic and comfortable. The chairs looked comfortable. I think that's one of the things I find really funny in a lot of science fiction. I don't know if it's something that they do now so much in science fiction, but say some of the Star Wars movies, the original ones, things just look really uncomfortable to sit on, and I just always wondered why in this world with all this technology haven't you made things that are comfortable? It just doesn't make any sense. So I liked that this was both comfort but that futuristic and influenced, as we know, by the magic and what they could do with it. So I thought that was really cool. The blight is better in this episode than in the last one, but if it's a rot that spreads, as Moraine said, I still say it's not quite right, especially on the fringes of it, like how that abruptness, like I spoke about in the last video. I just don't think they've quite got the blight right, in my opinion. I also imagined it a lot more sparse, I suppose. It's quite overgrown and difficult to walk through. I think maybe that was partially more of a budget decision than anything else, because as I wrote here, budget impacts, they're walking in circles. Like, they've clearly made a really quite a small section of the blight and they're just sort of using it in different ways, in my interpretation of it anyway. So I wonder whether that was a bigger part of what was going on there and that is the budget impacting the design. I just imagined it more desert-like, but with rot and overgrown in places, but overgrown with unnatural things. That's how I imagined it. It's not quite what I pictured, but it's fine. Nothing that's ruining the episode. I think the whole thing would have been better. The whole episode, I just think it would have been better if they'd all gone. I get that. I actually do understand the choices they made, and I wonder whether they had to make some changes because Matt wasn't around, but I don't think so. It seemed that this is the direction they were always going to go in. I feel that it would have been better if they'd stuck together. I think it would have changed the ending a little bit, quite significantly, if they had, though. I especially think that seeing Malkia, the city, Lan's home, would have had a bigger impact if Lan had been there and Nynaeve had been there to actually see all that he'd lost. And that could have caused some more division between the two of them, rather than what happened later. I'm not sure. I wish that they'd all gone together. I understand why they didn't, so I can accept it because it's different, and what they did does work. It's just, I think I would have liked them to have stuck together, because I think I wrote here, the scenes between Rand and Moraine, just the two of them, they did feel a little flat. They felt lacking. And not because of the actors. I just feel that there should have been other people there. Like, that's just how I feel about it. That's my opinion. I can understand why they've gone a different direction though. So and it made a lot more sense on second viewing. As I sort of was watching things. The first time around, I was just like, this is just not quite working for me, but it looked more on second viewing. I do wonder if the theory, someone posted in the comments about her being affected by Matt's taint is accurate. This seems to, she just doesn't feel like the same Moraine that she was prior to healing Matt. So I do wonder whether it was the Matt thing or it was the death of Karene and Stepan that have impacted her, and I think that they're sort of leaving that quite ambiguous. She just and being banished as well. I feel that there's a few things here. She just doesn't feel like Moraine. She doesn't feel like she's at full strength going into this. She feels unsure and almost a little bit not beaten. She doesn't feel beaten at all. She just feels burdened, in rightly so. But she just, I wonder, I think that makes a lot of sense, that maybe she is carrying some of that taint and that'll come back in season 2 in some way. So I understand why they're not there, the crew, but it doesn't quite feel right. Although it does make sense why Rand didn't want them coming, given it was Moraine had implied that it was certain death, not that it was in the end. So I feel like they set the stakes a lot higher than they really were for this situation. I think that's the problem. I never felt that the stakes were high enough. And I feel that maybe they would have been higher if Rand felt that his friends were threatened at the Eye. And I think that's one of the things that happens in the book so well, is he does a lot of what he does because he's protecting his friends, and when they're not there, he left his friends behind because he was protecting them. So I see it both ways. I'm trying to look at it. I think I like what they've done. I would have chosen to do it differently, but I can accept and understand what they've done and expect that a lot of it will make a lot more sense when we watch season 2, if that makes sense. So I'm not negative about it. I'm not against what they've done. I'm confused and waiting, and not in a bad way. I'm confused and excited to see how these changes impact what happens in the future events. I just think that it'll be really interesting to see. I think we all are waiting for that though. So now, Nynaeve and Lan's exchange. I wanted to love this, and I did love it, a lot of it. I thought that their exchange was really, really beautiful in some ways, but again, I'm trying to be positive, but there was just things like this. I can't get past the fact that Nynaeve was telling Lan that Moraine had a tell, and that is how Lan was going to be able to track her. Now, I just think that Moraine is not trying overly hard to cover her tracks to start with. And Lan is supposed to be a really good tracker. And I know Nynaeve is set up to be able to track Lan, and that all makes sense. But I just don't think that this made sense. That Nynaeve, I understand her giving permission, go find Moraine, go help Rand if you can, I'll stay here. Okay, that's fine. It was, I'll tell you how you can do it. I'm like, I'm pretty sure Lan is capable of tracking Moraine or Rand, or both of them, without Nynaeve's help. That's just my thoughts on that. Having said that though, Lan's words, which are lifted almost exactly from the book from what I can remember, they were just beautiful as always. It was beautifully bittersweet. Maybe I wonder whether it's a little bit confusing why she's pushing her away again, especially after he just let her in. And I know circumstances have changed, that when he did let her in, when they did get together, that they thought that was going to be their last night because they were all off to the Eye the next day. So it was almost like a last night of the world kind of thing. But I think, given they're clearly going back to they're playing with that will they won't they kind of thing, and I think I would have preferred a slow burn, so that I would have preferred, if this is the direction that they're going in, for them to not have had them get together the way that they did. I think if they could have had a lot of the same events happened, just without the sex. I think that's really what I'm getting at, is I think that they've gone that step, and now Lan's backing up again saying, "Ooh, whoa, whoa, go find someone else." And that's fine. He can do that if he wants. I think I just would have preferred them to sit up all night and talked, got to know each other, learned more about each other, and then when this happens, I almost feel like this. I just don't know. I would have preferred the slow burn than have them get together in the last episode, in episode 7, and then for him to backtrack again like this. It just doesn't quite feel right based on the characters that we're seeing. Lan hasn't had that same. We haven't got the reasoning behind why he would do this to Nynaeve the same way that we did in the books. So I think it's just an interesting choice, and it's fine. I'll deal. And I just think that it could have hit more powerfully if they were almost there. And then he says, "Hang on, I do care for you and all that, but I'm not for you," kind of thing. I think it would have hit more if they hadn't gotten together already. Anyway, and then we get the first dream that is like the dreams that I expected. I knew it had to be a dream. Well, I assumed it was a dream really quickly, but for the shortest moment, I thought they'd killed Moraine off, and thought that they'd gone for a really extreme change to the TV series, for the TV series, and I thought, oh, well, that could be interesting. I honestly don't know how much of a part Moraine has to play after book 3. So I don't know whether she's integral to the story or not anymore. I just don't know. And I thought, oh, maybe they've killed her off just for the slightest moment. And I'm like, no, it won't be. So that was sort of, as soon as we saw that it was the man, or the Dark One, I figured it was a dream. My big question here is, do we think it's actually the Dark One in this scene, or Baalzamon? I thought that this would be really interesting. It would be a brilliant twist down the track for it to be the same kind of thing, where we think this is the Dark One, and for it actually not to be, and for it to be that other person. But they've never, as far as I can remember, I don't think they've actually used Baalzamon and talked about that. So they're going about it in a different way, and it's actually quite good how they're doing it, I think. So I've written here then, hang on, just checked on X-Ray, and he's listed as Ishmael, which I think is a really missed opportunity. So in a lot of the casting, he was listed as the man, and I thought that made sense. But then in X-Ray, he's listed as Ishmael, and any viewer who has been paying attention, I'm pretty sure Ishmael was mentioned as a Forsaken back when Stepan was looking at his little figurines, but maybe not. Maybe they didn't. But I just thought that was maybe a little bit of a mistake on their behalf for him to be listed as Ishmael when they were sort of playing it up that he was the man. They never called him the Dark One. And so I thought that was really interesting, just in regards to the name of it. I'd say that no one will realise until later that they're not the same, and unless they actually look at what I looked at. But why not call him Baalzamon to at least keep the mystery? Or why not keep that the man? Why actually put Ishmael there? I did enjoy their interactions though, although Rand stabbing himself at the end was a bit extreme. Obviously, it's not that dream world, or I believe, from what I understand about the dream world, if he had hurt himself there, it would have hurt him in the real world as well, I think. So maybe this is not quite that same dream world. This is another form, which makes sense, I suppose, with the other manipulations of the dream world that we've seen so far. More things I don't quite love. I'll try and add some things that I really liked, if I remember. More things I don't love: the Trolloc attack, that it happened the way that it did, the battle on Feldara. I think my problem here is not the attack so much. I thought that was fine. The Gap and Malkia are both too close to Feldara, I think, is my problem. And I think that the whole Feldara involvement was unnecessary. Except, like, I don't think that it was necessary in any way, shape or form, except to kill off Lady Emelisa. Other than that, I really don't think it was a necessary part of the thing. But that may change when we see the aftermath of the battle and Egwene and Nynaeve's involvement and all that kind of stuff. It might make more sense. The battle, I thought, looked good, but I just don't think it was necessary the way it was done, almost entirely to give the others something to do. I think that was really it. They were looking for something for them to do, and I don't think it was necessary. That's just how I feel. I feel that they could have just had it happening in the Gap, like in the books, and not involve Feldara in the same way, other than maybe to prepare for future if the Gap falls. But I don't know. I can deal with changes. I actually am pretty good with changes. I just didn't think this was a necessary change. So anyway, I'll come back to the battle a little bit. I think this episode did a good job of setting up Min as a character, as a returning character. I'll assume she'll be either in Camlin or Tar Valon when the girls get there, get wherever they end up, because we don't quite know whether they'll be heading to Tar Valon or Camlin, or who knows. I'm looking forward to seeing more of Kay Alexander, who plays Min in future episodes. I think she brings something really interesting to the cast, just as a whole, and to Min in particular. And I really love her no-nonsense feel. I just think she's done a really great job of capturing Min, probably in a different way than I pictured, but in a really great way. I think she looks older than I pictured Min to look, but maybe I was picturing Min to be too old. And they've all been aged up, and it all makes sense. I'm okay. I actually think it's really quite a good piece of casting, a good bit of casting there, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of her. Oh, more things that I'm not 100% sure about though. So I just gave you a positive. Min, really great, but I'm not really sold on the design for the Eye of the World. It's definitely nothing like the books, which is fair. I think that's fair enough. Although I do think it would have been quite awesome, funny, contrasting, not funny, for it to look more like the Eye of the World from the book. So lush and green and all these kind of things. So I just think that would have been a really cool contrast kind of thing. But yeah, fair enough. I don't think it would have been quite appropriate for the feel that they were going for, given the Eye of the World isn't the Green Man's territory or any of that kind of stuff. But I also think my actual bigger problem was that it wasn't intimidating or futuristic enough. For it to be his prison. So I think, given what we've seen of the Dragon Reborn lose and the world 3,000 years ago, I just don't feel that this is quite the look that I would have gone for the prison. The prison looks like it could have been from the same time as Shador Logoth or Tar Valon, and not from further back. But then it got me thinking, maybe it's not his prison. This is where I think maybe it's only the prison of some or all of the Forsaken, and the real prison has been lost in history and they don't actually know where it is. so it could still end up being somewhere else. And this is one of the places where the key, you know, the shattered rock and all that kind of, whatever it's called. I just feel it's really too close to Faldara for the blight to have spread for 3,000 years and not reached the city yet, and to only have taken Melchior 40 years ago for the blight to have taken over. I know that the whole thing of them standing against it and all that makes sense, but I'm thinking that maybe the Eye of the World isn't the Dark One's prison, and that's just what people have thought that it was. That's my current thinking, and we'll see if that pans out. I think it would make sense either way. I just feel that the design wasn't quite right. It was good for the Forsaken, but not so good for the Dark One. Just not quite the right time period for either, but I'm okay. I'll allow it. Now, I don't know if these two characters play a part in future books, so I don't know how much of, other than I know that the Great Hunt, they have something to do in the Great Hunt, but that's obviously not so relevant. But I am annoyed that Lord Agama and Lady Amelisa have died. I don't think that they both needed to die. I think one of them could have died and the other one could have survived, or they both could have survived. Surely one of them could have survived, especially to realise that this wasn't the last battle. They were set out thinking that this was the last battle, or their last battle. But I just feel that it was unnecessary to kill them both. And obviously they hired those actors on a very, very short 2-episode contract. I just didn't think it was necessary to kill them off. And I don't know if they come back after the Great Hunt in the books. So I don't know if it's going to have a big impact. I just didn't think it was necessary. I didn't feel either of their deaths. I think I wasn't emotionally invested in them, but I think maybe I would have been able to be more emotionally invested if one of them had died and the other hadn't. I don't know. Maybe. I think it's an interesting move for the Horn to be in Faldara. Given the changes, it makes the most logical sense, and I was surprised by it in a good way. I thought, oh, that's actually a really interesting way of getting around that issue. How people don't know that it's there is another thing. Obviously some people know, but how that rumour hasn't got out, but I suppose maybe it has. Who knows? We haven't really heard anything about the Great Hunt from Ilion or anything like that. So I think it's a really interesting way of incorporating the Horn and the fact that the Horn is stolen. Although I would have liked that to have been stolen next episode. No, that's fine. It's fine. I think they were just looking to pad out some of the story a little, which I think would have been different if they'd all gone with them to the Eye of the World. I think they could have had some different things going on. I do wonder where the Great Hunt crew, the Shinarians who join Rand and Perrin and Matt as they hunt, I wonder where they are, why they weren't at the battle, how are they going to deal with that, because I know that they were cast recently, but I just wonder where they've been and how, were they part of the fight at the Gap or somewhere else and survived? Were they somewhere else? Maybe they were the group that was sent off to wall in the ways, the Waygate, maybe. Who knows? I assume the parts with the Horn and with Fane, this is where I start jumping around a little bit more. I assume there were scenes here that would have really benefited from Matt, or that they probably initially planned for Matt to be a part of, given the Fane-Matt interactions. It doesn't make as much sense for Fane and Perrin to come up against each other like they did. And given how they've set it up so that in the books Fane was after Rand, and the TV series has put the Fane, and they've pushed the Fane-Matt connection more so. I just wonder whether that was some of the things that were missing here. I don't think it was too big a deal. I just think that that was just a little bit strange that Perrin was the one having those interactions. I am a little bit worried about Loyal, and I'm really worried about him. But on the other side, I really enjoyed Fane in these episodes. In this episode, I thought Fane was fantastic. They've obviously not gone with the same madness book Fane has, and he feels a lot more threatening because of that. It means if he does the thing to the Fade in season 2, it'll come across quite differently, not so out of the blue, I suppose. This is a change I can really get behind, the change in Fane and how he comes across. He feels much less like Gollum. He was very much a Gollum type character in The Eye of the World. And his future manipulations, so particularly looking at sort of what he's doing more so with the White Cloaks, where I'm up to now, that makes a lot more sense from this version of Fane than the Gollum-like version that I know. Although the transition between Pat and Fane into sort of some more other kind of creature also makes sense in the books. Not creature, but yeah, under the influence of whatchamacallit from Shadow Lagoth, Mordeth. Under the influence of Mordeth, he shifts into something quite different. So I suppose I just haven't had to do that in the TV series, and it does make more sense. He's a cool character, and I actually really hope that we get to see more screen that time from him in season 2, because I think that will be really fun to see him. I especially want to see him with Matt and with Rand. I want to see that interaction in a different way as well. I also really liked the dilemma that Perrin felt with the Way of the Leaf. I thought this was a really great way to tie some of that in. I think in the books, he was influenced by his time with the Tinkers, but not to this extent. And you can see he's sort of umming and ahhing in the books between the hammer and the axe. But that was more to do with him wanting to be a blacksmith, not a warrior. This is him actually dealing with the fact that he wants the peace that Illa sort of talked to him about in the Way of the Leaf, what that can help him, and the importance of peace and all of that kind of stuff. So it's going to be really interesting to watch Perrin's story unfold. I'm enjoying seeing it unfold in the books, and I think I am really hoping that Perrin in the TV series has a similar kind of journey in a different way, though, and I like that. The hammer and the axe stuff in book 3 takes on a whole new meaning, given he's trying to live peacefully, and this also has an impact on why he doesn't accept the wolf side of himself as well, because the wolf is violent. So it might impact that, which is kind of cool as well. So anyway, back to Rand's vision. I thought this was quite clever, a really clever way of including things, even more so if they draw on the same theme for a Gwen's test and the same vision, same concepts and things. As we haven't seen into Rand's head as much as we did, or at all really, as we did in the books, we haven't seen how much he wants a normal life and how much he is that reluctant hero. So this was a great inclusion to sort of see that this was his desire, just a normal life with a Gwen. Even the man with him also taunting Moraine at the same time was very good. I thought this was all really great. This was a moment, this was part of the episode that I really, really enjoyed. And while it could have been added to, it wouldn't have been impacted hugely one way or the other, in a negative way or a positive way, if the others were also at the Eye of the World. I just thought it was really quite well done, the tempting of Rand. It's different and not what I expected, and that's not a bad thing. I actually thought that was really good all round. And I think this, jumping around, again, I'm not talking about this in a linear way. What ramifications are there going to be for Moraine basically being gentled? From what we can tell, maybe it's a temporary thing, maybe it comes undone really quickly, but maybe it's a more permanent thing, and it's a huge choice that they've made here, but it opens up the chance for Nynaeve, or others, maybe a Gwen, to realize it can be reversed, this whole gentling kind of thing. So maybe the same for male Aes Sedai, especially, and this could be really useful later, as this episode's opening scene implied male and female Aes Sedai are both needed to defeat the Dark One. That's what I got out of the opening scene. I think this is opening up some possibilities that I'm really looking forward to sort of exploring more in the book as well, about all the male Aes Sedai out there and the corruption and the taint and the ones that have been gentled and the healing. I think I'm intrigued. So Moiraine's healing may prove integral to unblocking the male side of the Aes Sedai, and that could be really quite fun. So anyway, I don't know what's going on there, but interesting inclusion. Does that happen at some point later in the TV series? Don't tell me, I'll find out. Maybe in the books, I mean, not the TV series. Maybe this is something that's part of Moiraine's story later and they've decided to bring it up and I just don't realise it. Regardless, I think it's a really interesting thing to have happened. The battle, Lord Agama's death feels like it should have been more. It just feels not much happened there. He was doing his job, shooting through the arrow slit thing, and then he died. I feel that this was a budgetary constraint. He wasn't a character that needed a big death. I feel like if it was another character who would have died out on the battlefield, not in the corridor, where it was clearly I think a budgetary decision that they only had to show a couple of Trollocs and they didn't have to show many soldiers, so it was quite limited what they had to actually film. So I feel that his death was quite basic and not what I would expect from a lord like that. The battle has the same filming style as seen in episode 1 and in the battle for Lagain. So we don't really see the big picture fighting. It's a smart budgetary sort of way to sort of show that it's bigger than it is. Makes sense. It's actually not a bad way to do it. It had a good feel to it. I just thought that his death should have been bigger. It should have been a bigger sacrifice, I suppose. But maybe that's the point, is it was just a really normal death. He died as any of his other soldiers would have died. Actually, we don't see much fighting at all other than through the arrow slits. And this is my preference. I would have preferred to see the gap battle as written in the book. So they go off a distance, so they're there quite a bit before a couple of days it takes to get there. And I would have loved to have seen Rand in his power actually helping out and doing some of that. But this works. What they did works to try and build it as an epic class battle. It tries to set something up. I just would have liked to have seen the big giant Rand kind of thing. Or godlike Rand, whatever. Maybe not a giant. He's not a giant Rand in the sky in this one. But you know, that scene in the books, I would have liked to have seen that. Anyway, then what I find... Oh, the most interesting choice. Yes, this is the most interesting choice I thought out of the whole episode. To replace that magic Rand with Lady Amelisa, with Nynaeve, a Gwen, and 2 untrained power users. I thought this was a really interesting choice. Honestly, I thought it was unnecessary. Well, to this story it was necessary, the way that they were telling it. It was necessary. I don't think this is a change that was necessary in my mind. But I'd say it's about setting the girls up as equally powerful, not equally powerful, but as equally as important. It was giving them something important to do in the scheme of things as Rand. And it was making sure that they just didn't fade into the background. So anyway, just little side note, Lady Amelisa should have known she could not handle that much power, and she was clearly on a little bit of a power trip, like enjoying all that energy and everything, and it was interesting. I suppose it corrupts, or it gets to everyone. She could have shut it down, and it was too much in that moment. She couldn't, so it had got to her too much. So it was very interesting to watch her burn up, I suppose. It's definitely setting the girls up as a force already, not just Nynaeve, but a Gwen as well. Mostly Nynaeve, because all the decisions there, it was she's the one who chose to save Nynaeve and all that. But also, how did a Gwen heal Nynaeve? That is interesting. Very interesting. I'm preferring watching them grow in the books. I'm preferring watching them grow into their power. They have this raw potential, but they're growing into it. Whereas I feel like the TV series is pushing this raw power a little bit more, and I don't know that I love it. I think I would prefer, I get why they're doing it though, because they couldn't just push them as these two powerful women and then take that away, these two potential dragon reborns, and then take that away. But they have kind of with Perrin and with Matt, like Matt's disappeared, so that makes sense. But they've sort of pushed Perrin off to the side for the moment, as in, your wolf stuff's not important, let's just leave that for next season. That's fine, I like that choice. I don't think that they needed to have Rand. I feel like this took away from Rand being the dragon reborn, is what I think. This isn't what I wrote when I'm talking this through with you. I think my issue is that it took away from Rand being the dragon reborn, and that is where my issue is. But I think, yeah, as I said, I think they're trying to set the girls up as more integral earlier than later. So I'm preferring the journey in the books, watching the girls grow into their power. Although we are seeing that more with a Gwen in the TV series, she's going to have to grow into it, and like Nynaeve's raw power, which again is the same in the books. So I do really like that the channeling of the 5 women looked quite raw and untrained, especially in comparison to the Aes Sedai during the battle with Clegane's men. I thought that contrast was really, really nice. So as Nynaeve burns up while saving a Gwen, I thought that was really nice. That was probably the most emotional moment of the whole episode, when Nynaeve is saying those words to a Gwen about remember who you are, remember what it is to be a wisdom, remember I'm handing this over to you. Nynaeve will continue to sacrifice herself for her charges, and if that isn't true to the book Nynaeve, nothing is. I'm still confused how a Gwen pulled her back from what looked like death, but probably as they're already linked through healing and just pure sheer willpower. And I thought that this was really interesting, definitely this link to the time a Gwen had breakbone fever, and a Gwen's sheer willpower, according to Nynaeve, saved her, but also there was this healing that a Gwen didn't even really know that she was doing, healing Nynaeve. So I feel that the same thing could have happened. Maybe a Gwen was on the brink of death when she had breakbone fever all those years ago, and Nynaeve pulled her back, and now they're linked in a way that is more than just a normal healing link. Anyway, just some thoughts. And I think Rand's choice to disappear at the end of the episode does make a lot of sense, but I am super curious how he'll rejoin them, and also how he'll learn to use his sword without Lan teaching him, because I feel that was the one thing that he gained from staying at the end of the last one, is that Lan was able to teach him some sword skills. And that's something that he hasn't got. He hasn't been with Lan long enough to develop any of that. So a couple of questions. Is Loial dead? I really hope not. They can't do that, can they? Again, he's one of those characters. I don't know what role he has to play. He doesn't seem to have a huge role that couldn't be done by other people in the books. So there's a possibility that he will die, but then maybe Veron will show up. I don't know where she comes from, but maybe Veron will show up and heal him, because at this stage Moraine can't heal him, and Gwen and Nynaeve don't know how to heal, so maybe Veron will show up and this will be her showing up. And then that links her with them a little bit more. How are they going to get Rand to rejoin them, given he's gone off in his own direction, in a completely different direction from what I can tell? And how will Matt rejoin them? And when will we see Matt again? I'm assuming in the first episode of season 2. But how? And what will bring them back together? And will the dagger come into play in the same way? Or have they decided not to go in that direction? I don't know. How long before Moiraine is healed? Is that why they have her go off in a different direction to the hunt? In the Great Hunt, Moiraine and Lan go off to do some more research and to find out some more stuff. And that's research. And maybe this is their way of getting Moiraine somewhere. Maybe it's her way of returning to Tarvalon, or maybe, I don't know, something might happen interesting. I'm sure it will be interesting. And as I said, was the Eye of the World really the Dark One's prison, or has his actual prison been lost to history in this TV version of the events? So maybe he is at whatever the prison is called, Shuggle, you know what it's called better than I do. The place starting with sh. So maybe that's where he actually is, but they don't realise that. And that's intrigued me. I think that would be a really cool little twist there. So that's my thoughts there. I preferred this episode on a second watch. So if you haven't watched it a second time and you're on the fence about it, go watch it a second time, because I definitely preferred it knowing what was happening and not expecting things to happen the way that they happened in the book. So I'm looking forward to actually going back. My plan is to go back and watch the whole season now and look for all the setups that happened early for the changes that were made, but also just to appreciate it for where it's going and not to constantly be looking at the comparison, I suppose. Yeah, so watching it that second time meant that I was able to enjoy it for what it was and not so much what I'd hoped it or expected it to be initially. It was not as good an episode though as some of the others in the series, but I think that's connected to some budget issues, really. I feel that they had to cut some corners in this episode that I think that they could have had some more money. But I also think that the Matt casting issue, the changeover in cast, has impacted the episode a little bit, just like it did the last one. I feel that there were some scenes that Matt should have been in. And I just think as a whole, the whole season needed an extra 2 episodes. I think even one more episode would have given it a little bit more room to breathe. I think it just needed a little bit more space, really. And that's just, budget, I suppose. So I'm hoping that the next season will have a little bit more room to breathe and won't feel quite so rushed in places. I will say though, my complaints about the Eye of the World, the book, that the pacing was off. So the pacing was off in the TV series. So really, it's true to the book. And what more can we hope for? That it stays true to the book. So that's just, these are just my thoughts, as always. So I'd be interested, what did you think of the episode? I think I've got some more notes. I think the direction they're taking it in makes a lot of sense. Yes, so I think I am actually not against the direction they're taking it in. I think it will make a lot more sense, especially when we see the first couple of episodes of season 2. I think by the end of season 2, we'll have settled into a rhythm of what this show is and what it's going to be like as opposed to the books. So I think that it'll help with season 2. A lot more, and people's enjoyment of it, fans' enjoyment of it. And I also think that it's always really important to remember that a season finale has to set up a lot. And I think that this one, a lot of the plot lines that they focused on were actually, they came out in episode 7, the mystery around the Dragon Reborn. If they'd held off on that reveal until episode 8 would have been better, or more explosive. We would have felt that a big reveal had happened. I don't feel like any big reveals happened in episode 8. So So I feel that episode 7, where we had the reveal, actually concluded, in a way, it concluded season 1. And episode 8, this is what I got on my rewatch. This is why I recommend watching it again. Episode 8 is more of a bridging episode, but a bridging season 1 and season 2. So I think that for me is where maybe things would have been different if they'd shifted a few things around, if they didn't have the reveal happening in episode 7. Then maybe episode 8 would have had some sort of explosive moment, which it did not have. It did not have an explosive moment, which is why, in my opinion, it felt like a little bit of a letdown. That's a good episode though. Not a letdown of an episode, just it didn't have that same momentum. Anyway, in that way, it makes a lot more sense, just in general, I think. It's not concluding storylines, that's what I mean. So other new viewers, the ones that I spoke to, my brother in particular, he hasn't read the books. He's reading The Eye of the World at the same time. So he's currently, he said he's up to Shador Goth in the books. So he has watched the whole thing and he appears to have really enjoyed it. I'm really glad it's set up that we'll get the Great Hunt. I'm really glad that it's set up what we're going to get in the Great Hunt. It's made some changes to what we can expect. So we're going to go into season 2 knowing that some of these key things have changed already. And so we're not going to be expecting to see them in the first half. So I think it's going to mean we're going to be expecting new things and different things to happen. And just to finish off my notes, I wrote, and the Ascension looked epic and I can't wait. I honestly cannot wait for season 2. I think this episode did a really good job of setting up my excitement for season 2. So rather than being a good concluding episode, it was a great setup episode. So I love it for that. And that's what I'm taking away from it. So what did you think? Do you agree with me? It's more of a setup than a conclusion, or do you think differently to me? Did you like things that I didn't like, or did you not like things that I did like? I thought it was good. I'm really happy. And season 1 has been better as a whole than I could have expected for a TV series of this magnitude and with this much expectation on it. So I'm really excited. I'm also really excited for the chance to get stuck back into The Shadow Rising. I have officially read enough that I can film my first video. So I'm actually going to film it straight after this, just to sort of get that happening. And so you should have that next week. And have a great New Year if you're watching this before New Year. I'm filming this on the 30th of December. And I am really super excited for a new year to begin and for new opportunities to read and to get season 2 released. I'm expecting it'll be out in November next year. Would that be correct? Anyone know? Let me know. And yeah, get down in the comments and say hi. I will see you with my next video. Okay, bye.